The wind howled through the barren arena, stirring the thick red dust into swirls that coiled like dying embers. The sky above was dark, bruised with the colors of an impending storm, though no rain had touched this world in centuries. Towering stone pillars, cracked and weathered by time, loomed in a vast circle, marking the boundaries of the pit. A silent audience of alien warlords, soldiers, and mercenaries watched from the surrounding platforms, their many eyes gleaming with the anticipation of blood. In the center stood the human. Alone. He was unarmed, his stance relaxed, his face unreadable beneath a layer of dust and dried blood. His clothing, once a functional military uniform, was now torn and scorched, evidence of battles fought before this one. His captors had stripped him of weapons, armor, anything they believed could give him an edge. Yet even now, without blade or rifle, he did not cower. Across from him, a towering figure stepped forward, clad in obsidian black battleplate etched with ancient war sigils. The alien's reptilian features twisted into a sneer, its golden eyes brimming with amusement. "You stand before Lord Xelthar of the Dominion," the creature declared, its voice guttural, laced with arrogance. "Countless warriors have begged for their lives where you stand now. Some have wept. Others have thrown themselves upon their knees, pleading for mercy." Xelthar's fanged mouth curled into something resembling a smile. "Yet you do neither." "Strange." The human said nothing. A deep, chuffing growl rumbled from the shadows behind Xelthar. A creature emerged, its monstrous form a grotesque amalgamation of muscle and plated chitin. It moved on 4 powerful legs, each ending in razor-sharp claws that dug furrows into the stone as it stalked forward. Its elongated head bore rows of needle-like teeth, and its burning violet eyes locked onto the human with unsettling intelligence. Xelthar rested a gauntlet hand on the beast's massive neck. "This is Krilnos," he said, stroking the creature's armored hide. "A war beast bred from a line of executioners, each more perfect than the last. Entire colonies have fallen before its kind. It does not know hesitation nor mercy." His fingers tightened slightly. "One word from me, and my pet will devour you." Silence hung between them. Xelthar expected fear, the widening of human eyes, the sharp inhale of panic. He had seen it in 100 species before, bodies stiffening, minds breaking beneath the inevitability of death. But the human simply watched him, his expression unreadable, as if Xelthar had just described the weather. Krilnos let out a snarl, sensing the tension in its master. It stomped forward, lowering its head until it was only inches from the human. The creature exhaled, its breath thick with the stench of raw meat and bile. Still, the man did not flinch. Xelthar's amusement flickered. "I wonder," he mused, tilting his head, "is this courage or stupidity? Does your kind truly lack the instinct to fear death?" The human finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he tilted his head, studying the beast before him. Then he exhaled through his nose, almost as if unimpressed. Xelthar's jaw tightened. This was not the reaction he had prepared for. "Ah," the alien murmured, narrowing his golden eyes. "I see now. You believe yourself strong. You think humanity is something special, don't you? That you are different from the countless weaklings that have fallen before my pet." The human's voice came at last, calm, measured, and dangerously quiet. "I think," he said, "that you talk too much." For the first time in many cycles, Xelthar hesitated. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A sharp, guttural command left the warlord's throat, a sound both unnatural and commanding. Krilnos's eyes flared, its massive form tensing as it coiled to strike. The audience held their breath. The human simply stood, waiting, and then the beast lunged. Krilnos surged forward in a blur of chitin and muscle, its enormous jaws yawning wide, promising an end that would be neither swift nor merciful. The ground trembled beneath its charge, the sheer weight of the creature shaking loose dust from the ancient stones. Xelthar watched, expecting the inevitable, the crunch of bone, the wet snap of flesh torn asunder, the cries of agony. He had seen it all before. But the human did not move. Not to run, not to raise his arms in a feeble defense, not even a brace for impact. He simply stood, his gaze locked onto the oncoming monstrosity with the same calm he had worn since the moment he was dragged into this arena. Then, impossibly, Krilnos hesitated. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. A fraction of a second's delay, a minute falter in the unwavering trajectory of its attack. But it was there. The beast's eyes flickered, something primal and uncertain flashing behind their violet glow. Its charge wavered, the crushing force of its momentum dampened by something it did not fully understand. Xelthar saw it, and his amusement soured into confusion. Krilnos struck, but not with the unrelenting savagery that had been promised. The massive claws that should have torn through flesh with effortless brutality only raked the air, missing their mark by the breadth of a whisper. The human had not dodged. The beast had missed. A ripple of murmurs swept through the watching crowd. This was wrong. Krilnos pulled back, huffing loudly, its plated tail lashing the ground in frustration. It shook its head as if trying to clear some unseen haze, its nostrils flaring as it inhaled deeply, tasting the air, searching for something familiar in the scent of its prey. The human exhaled slowly. Xelthar felt his hands tighten into fists. No, this was not possible. Kill him, he commanded, his voice a low growl. Krilnos hesitated again. The great war beast stood frozen, its powerful limbs tense, its monstrous jaws trembling. Its breath came in sharp huffs now, as if something were pressing down upon it, something unseen and suffocating. Its claws flexed against the ground, carving deep grooves into the dust, yet it did not advance. It did not strike. The human took a step forward. It was not a large step, not a threatening one. It was slow, deliberate, almost casual, but the effect it had on the beast was immediate. Krilnos flinched, its enormous frame shifting backward, its tail curling inward like that of a lesser creature backing away from a predator. Xelthar's breath caught. This was not right. This was wrong. The human raised his hand, not in defense, not in defiance, but in something eerily akin to familiarity. His fingers curled, ever so slightly, and Krilnos reacted. Its violet eyes widened, its head dipping lower, its body tensing in an unmistakable gesture of recognition. Submission. The warlord's throat rumbled with a sound between disbelief and rage. His mighty executioner, his perfected instrument of destruction, was bowing. Not to him, not to the hand that had fed it, trained it, forged it into a living weapon. No, it was bowing to the human. The realization crashed into Xelthar with the force of a collapsing world. His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of his fury. What have you done? The human finally looked at him. Nothing you haven't done yourself, he said. His voice remained calm, but beneath it was something colder, sharper. You broke this creature. You bent its will until it obeyed without question. You made it fear you. He took another step forward, and Krilnos did not retreat this time. Instead, it remained still, its breathing steady, its gaze locked onto him with something almost like expectation. The difference between us, Xelthar, is that I didn't have to use a whip. The warlord's mind raced, his pulse thundering against the inside of his skull. He had spent years mastering the Dominion's war beasts, forging them into perfect instruments of slaughter. He had broken them, remade them, forced their instincts into submission through pain and dominance. Never had one hesitated, never had one defied him. And yet here stood alone, unarmed human, unraveling everything with nothing but his presence. Krilnos shifted again, a low rumble rolling from deep within its chest. Not a growl of aggression, but something else, something that made Xelthar's blood run cold. The human's fingers curled ever so slightly once more, and the great beast responded, lowering its massive head further, as if awaiting instruction. Xelthar's claws dug into his gauntlets, rage bubbling beneath his skin. You think this is over? He hissed. You think you've won? The human tilted his head, eyes gleaming with something unreadable. Not yet, he said, but you're running out of moves. Xelthar bared his fangs, his muscles coiling. The arena had fallen silent, the gathered warlords and warriors no longer whispering, no longer watching with idle amusement. They were waiting now, watching not for sport, but for outcome. The unthinkable had happened. The warlord had lost control of his own executioner. But Xelthar was not finished. He reached for the blade at his side. If the beast would not obey, then he would carve this human apart himself. The human did not flinch. Krilnos did. The great war beast let out a warning growl, not at the human, but at Xelthar. And in that moment, the warlord knew. The human had not merely survived. He had won. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, pressing against Xelthar like a weight he could not lift. His fingers curled around the hilt of his blade, but he did not draw it. Not yet. His mind, honed by war and sharpened by countless victories, calculated every possibility in rapid succession. None of them ended the way he wanted. Krilnos, his prized executioner, remained still, its massive head lowered, its stance neither aggressive nor afraid. The human stood beside it, one hand resting lightly against the creature's thick, plated hide. It should have been impossible. A war beast of the Dominion obeyed one master. It did not waver. It did not question. And yet, here it was, submitting to a creature it should have ripped apart in an instant. Xelthar clenched his teeth, shoving the truth aside. No, this was not submission. This was confusion, a momentary hesitation, a mistake. The human exhaled slowly, his gaze unwavering. This was never about strength, he said, his voice measured, deliberate. You think power is something you take, something you crush beneath your heel. His fingers brushed the ridges of Krilnos's armored head, and the beast responded with a slow blink, a deep, rumbling breath. But real power doesn't come from fear, Xelthar. It comes from understanding. The warlord's lips curled into a snarl. Spare me your philosophy. His voice was raw, stripped of its earlier arrogance. He took a step forward, his claws flexing, his golden eyes burning with rage. You think this changes anything? You think my people will bow to you? The human shook his head. I don't need them to. Something inside Xelthar snapped. With a guttural roar, he surged forward, his blade slicing through the air in a streak of burning silver. Fast, faster than anything human reflexes could counter. A final act of dominance. A final assertion of control. And yet, he never reached his target. Krilnos moved first. A deafening snarl ripped through the arena as the war beast intercepted, its colossal form colliding with its former master. Xelthar was fast, but Krilnos was faster. The warlord barely had time to twist before the beast's massive claws slammed into him, sending him skidding across the dust-choked ground. His armor took the brunt of the impact, but the force still rattled his bones. He rolled, hissing, scrambling to his feet. His blade trembled in his grip, though whether from pain or something deeper, he refused to acknowledge. The beast had turned against him. The human had taken it. Xelthar bared his fangs, hatred seething beneath his skin. But before he could rise fully, Krilnos advanced again, placing one enormous clawed foot onto his chest. The weight was crushing, pinning him down as easily as a child trapping an insect. He struggled, but it was useless. The beast loomed over him, jaws parting, fangs glistening with the promise of death. Xelthar had always believed fear was a weapon. He had wielded it against countless species, reducing entire civilizations to cowering wretches before obliterating them. He had never once considered what it felt like to be on the receiving end. Until now, the human stepped into view, his expression unreadable, his shadow stretching long beneath the arena's artificial lights. He crouched, meeting Xelthar's glare with something that was not cruelty, nor gloating, but something worse. Pity. I could let it kill you, he said, voice calm. You wouldn't be the first warlord to fall at the hands of his own creation, and you wouldn't be the last. He exhaled, glancing at Krilnos, who remained motionless, waiting. But that's not my choice to make. Xelthar stilled. His pulse thundered in his ears, but his pride forced him to keep his expression hard. His lips curled into a silent snarl. He had never begged before. He would not start now. Seconds stretched into eternity. The war beast loomed, its breath hot against his face, its fangs inches from his throat. One word from the human, one command, and it would be over. But the command never came. The human stood. "Get up," he said. Krilnos hesitated for only a moment before withdrawing, its weight lifting from Xelthar's chest. The warlord gasped as air filled his lungs again, but his relief was short-lived, buried beneath a deeper wound: humiliation. Slowly, he forced himself to rise, every muscle screaming in protest. His blade lay discarded in the dust, useless. He ignored it. He would not fight an unwinnable battle. Not today. Around them, the silent audience of Dominion warriors and warlords remained frozen, their eyes reflecting something Xelthar could not bear to acknowledge. Doubt, uncertainty. The great Xelthar, conqueror of worlds, had been spared. Not by mercy, not by weakness, but by something they did not understand. The human studied him for a moment longer before turning away. Krilnos followed without hesitation, stepping to his side like a soldier falling into formation. It was not submission, not servitude. It was trust. Xelthar's fists clenched, his claws biting into his palms, but he said nothing. He could do nothing. The human paused at the edge of the arena, glancing back only once. "You wanted me to tremble," he said. "You wanted me to beg." His lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "But I think we both know who should be afraid now." And with that, he was gone.